So, good morning, Scott. Thanks for coming on here. And so, instead of me describing to the audience what your background is, why don't you just tell us, walk us through your military background?
So I was an Army enlisted and an officer. I served from 1999 to 2007 when I was medically retired. I did 2 tours in Iraq. I did some time in Afghanistan, and I kind of bounced around. It was interesting. As an enlisted guy, I did comms. So I was a signal guy. And then I went to combat arms when I became an officer. Then, of course, when I finished my career, I was working mostly in counter IED for supporting JIATO and other missions in theater at the time.
Okay, when did you leave the Army?
I left the Army. My retirement date was July 20th, 2007.
Okay, and what about after that?
So after that transition, well, I think you and I had kind of spoken about this. Is where we kind of met. My transition was a little bit unique. Because I was medically retired.
Yeah.
There was no TAP at the time. I think, and this is a very odd thing, I think they had something called ACAP, and I don't know if that even still exists anymore. Does the Army still do that? I don't know if they still do that, but at the time I actually didn't even get to go to it. So I think you and I may have transitioned around the same time when we left, but I was in the 1st Warrior Transition Unit. I don't even think it was called that yet. It was right around when the Walter Reed scandal had broken, when I was in launch school getting ready to come over and be transferred back to the United States when I was medevaced. I remember sitting there watching it break on Fox News. I think it was in like the day room or wherever it was at the hospital. And I was like, oh, okay. And then literally I was in an Air Force medical unit. I think that's where we all went, if I remember correctly. And there was like a medical expeditionary wing or something along those lines. And somebody from the Air Force came in and said, well, you're not going back to Walter Reed. You're going to go to Andrews, and then they're going to send you the assignment was going to be done there. I was like, we don't know any better. I asked questions, of course, but no one had a good answer.
Right.
When I got there, we stayed at Andrews for a good 72 hours, I think, or maybe it was like 48, 72. I don't remember, but it was more than a day. And then finally they split us up and we kind of went all over the country. But the story behind why I'm telling that kind of story is that they weren't really ready for us for transition. So I kind of feel for the girls and the guys that in that time, because when we got back, I wound up in Eisenhower Medical Center in Fort Gordon, Georgia, of all places.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong with Augusta. They play the Masters there every year. There's a reason. They got beautiful golf courses, but I wasn't going there for that reason. But yeah, so the interesting part about that was I wound up going there, and they just they weren't ready for us, right? Mm-hmm. So by the time I was still in the hospital, and then my physical evaluation board liaison officer, my PEBLO, and a team had come in essentially after I had gone through another surgery and I was rehabbing and doing all those things. And they basically said, well, at this time, you're going to be retired. And I was like, okay, so what's next? They're like, well, there's more to the story, but just to make it abbreviated for this, the bottom line was like, well, you're probably going to be out of here sooner than later. And I was like, okay. So the funny part about that, you can look back and laugh at it now, was, it was very quick too. We're talking about, it was only a matter of weeks and I was home, if that. It wasn't even like it was 6 weeks. It was like 2 weeks time. And then it was really abbreviated because they actually made me out process. And I was like, I don't have anything. They made me go to CIF. They didn't make me go to ACAP. They made me go to CIF. And I had nothing to turn in because I had no gear because everything was taken from me in theater, right? So I remember going to I couldn't drive, right? And I had a runner because I had no car. A runner took me to CIF. And I remember sitting there talking to the CIF person. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, can you just sign my paper? Like, my stuff, my gear is in some locker or it's left, in my foot locker somewhere. And I remember that was like, wow. So I remember my transition was bizarre because I had no prep, right? There was no, I think my only prep was one day this is 2007, right?
Yeah.
I like in that process where I'm like, okay, this is real. I opened my laptop and I was like, okay, actually I didn't have a laptop. I bought one. And I had a laptop. I opened it and I was like, I gotta go look for a job. I don't know what to do. And that was all being rushed very quickly. And then I was back home within just a day or two after that point. I remember that. I had no job. I had nothing. Like it was.
Well, you know, the reality is, even though yours was expedited, you had no control over that. Probably the majority of folks leaving the military are on a very similar schedule where they haven't prepared properly up until it. And it's not until they're really up against it where it's like, oh crap, my paycheck's done. Now I got to find a job. And so we have a lot of work to do in that regard. I think it's getting better. There are a lot of groups trying to change that. But you're an expert in government or in government contracts. So how did you get from not having a job, leaving the Army abruptly, to learning about government contracts?
Yeah, I was fortunate, I would always say. So there was good companies at the time that were looking to hire veterans, I felt. And I ran across, and it was defense contractors, right? I lived in Washington, D.C. It was a natural transition. I just started applying everywhere, right? Because I sat home for, like, I'd say a couple of days, and I'm like, oh, it's time for me to go get a job, right? Because I was done. I didn't know what I wanted to do because, I mean, at the time, there was a lot of counter ID contracting jobs, things of that nature, but I wasn't really sure. I bounced around a little bit, to be honest, with regards to the positions that I had. I didn't like most of the contracting stuff that I got into at first because it wasn't actually government compliance like I do now. It was just like doing mission support stuff, and that wasn't just for me. I got lucky enough to land with someone who, with a company that just wanted someone that knew operations and kind of wanted to guide me and kind of grow me. He was a former Air Force captain. I remember this, and he kind of took me under. He was senior in the company at the time, and then he's like, I just need someone who wants to try here. And that's exactly, I kind of got lucky enough for that position where he's like, I know you're going to work hard. And that's really what I kind of did. So in my mind, what happened was I just got so focused on what I was doing. I started to learn a lot more than what I expected. We saw the difference. And then that's really where I started to take off, and I focused on a very specific contracting area. And that made for me, that made the difference, right? That's where I started to say, okay, I feel like I'm getting better at this. And I started to focus all my attention on it, and not expecting it to be where I am now with as far as compliance goes. But that's really how it was born out of necessity, essentially, right? Because I had no other, I wasn't happy in doing anything else. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was lucky enough in the sense that somebody gave me an opportunity and I kind of latched on to something that I liked.
But you also had some formal education on it now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I have certificates, I have my MBA, I have, I've sat through so much training. So it wasn't, I mean, the two different things, right? They go hand in hand, you know that, right? So on the job is the most important. I think that's, for me, at least how I learn. I want to be thrown into fire, right?
Most veterans are probably the same way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think I learned I remember my first week being thrown into an inspector general audit, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? Like, it's the scariest thing in the world, but they're like, you're going to be fine. And I'm like, and that's the attitude. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I will be fine. It can't be any worse than what I'm just going through. So let's see what happens. So that kind of crash course always is the kind of thing that helped me out. So, and then, the formal education and other things always kind of went parallel as I grew over the years because I felt it was necessary to have.
Yeah. This sounds like a very obvious question, but just for our viewers, what does government contracting mean?
So, I mean, for government contracting is basically if you're going to, so the government, it's a better way to say this is that the government every day needs services and products from, all different sources, right? Because quite honestly, the government's not big enough to be able to handle all the jobs that it needs to be done, right? So in that sense, the government procures services and goods and products from commercially from everybody across the United States and the world, each day. So that's a government contract, right? That's a government contracting, is that the government through a mechanism, which is a government contract, will buy either services or goods from everything. I mean, things that I'm looking at right now, from a pen to flat screen TVs, whatever it is, to me, a human being, providing services. They purchase those every single day in order to conduct whatever service they need, least, or mission to, to be able to work on. And it's everything, right? That's from the Battlefield's Monument Commission Agency to, Department of Defense, to Homeland Security, to HHS, to everything out there. So every agency buys. So that's what I would say government contracting is.
Great. When you and I first met, you were teaching a class with IVMF, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. So how did that happen, and who was your audience, and what did you think about that?
So first off, great program. I think IVMF is, I would always say, the leader in the space, because I was was always honored to be able to teach for them with regards to government contracting. I believe, I remember I have pictures from that class, but I remember it was at the National Convention, I believe, is where we met, right? Yep. So we did the NatCon, and I was doing several classes about government contracting and just the different, I think that actual class we talked about was how you can leverage service-disabled veteran-owned small business status into the market, and be viable, essentially, right? What does that mean? And even to this day, I still teach that class because it's an important class to, excuse me, there's some nuances that have taken place since then, but it's always important to get that status. But we met at the NatCon, and I believe, EBV is the leader in that space. But I think, did you ever, I'm sorry, I didn't divert here. Did you do their actual class? Did you go through their
and when you say EBV, you're talking about Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for Disabled Veterans. So I went to their program over at Syracuse. They have a consortium of about 9 or 10 universities, around the country. So
right.
I went to it was about 9 days, I think, something like that. I went over Syracuse,
Yeah, I did. I did both, in the sense that I taught at Syracuse some classes for GovCon, and then also at the NatCon. So anybody else out there listening, absolutely take full advantage of the class, and it's true, right? So I think they're at UCLA, I believe they're at Texas A&M, they're all over Tulane, I think. So I think they're all over the United States. I would take absolutely full advantage of the fact that they have those courses.
Yeah, I think LSU, University of Florida, I believe, or maybe it's Florida State, Purdue, and like you said, UCLA. There's a number of them. So yeah, great program. So you mentioned STVOSV. What is that? I think a lot of people watching this are going to be interested in starting a veteran-owned small business or a disabled veteran-owned small business. So what's the difference, and what do they mean?
So if you're a veteran, so it's interesting, because I had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress about this, because it's a little bit we're going to get there. So let me take your time, unpack it. Yeah. Let me explain why. So we'll get there, because it's like, I think when I say we'll get there as a government, we'll get there, right? When it comes to getting this together. Because I think there was right intention a long time ago when they put these things in place, but it just wasn't very well executed. There was some strategic vision there, but then it just didn't work out. So right now, what's happening is, if you're this is government contracting only. If you want to be a veteran-owned small business or a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, the requirements are, and I'll put it in a nutshell, that you are a majority owner of the company and you have majority control of that company, and you are a service-disabled veteran, obviously based on your rating from the VA, which is 0. It could be X amount of percent from 0% higher. Or you could be a veteran-owned small business, which you don't require a rating from, obviously, from the VA, but you are, you honorably served as a veteran, and you have your discharge, you have your honorable discharge. So that would be probably the main distinguishing factor. The thing I want to let everybody know now that we're trying to work on, which hopefully will be, actually it has been executed under regulation, just hasn't been carried through yet, is that as of right now, underneath this change, it used to be called the System for Award Management, SAM. It's now called beta.sam.gov, because they've consolidated that. You can go ahead and register and self-certify to do work on every agency except for the VA, right? For the Department of Veterans Affairs. So all the other agencies, you can go ahead and self-certify, but understand that means that you are self-certifying something that says that you or the combined amount of individuals who own the supermajority of the company are either veterans or service disabled veterans, right? And they control that company, and that's where you would state that. There's other little factors that decide that, but that basically is the overall notion of what a self-certified veteran-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned company is. On the other side,
that's a very easy process.
that part, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
as long, I always tell people, just make sure you're being honest, and truthful, because
Sure.
you are, excuse me, you are certifying on a federal system, and 5 years in prison and $25,000, actually $250,000 fine, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, those things are very important. The other part of that is,
Just on that real quick, Scott. So is that something that veterans should be aware of, that there are people out there trying to take advantage of them and their status, and they could get jammed up?
absolutely, I think that's an important point, right? Listen, you have to be, so there's a lot of bad actors in the space, right? This is a part of why, and I'll go into this, the certification part, why I believe certification is required, not self-certification, but actual certification is required, because it's going to remove those bad actors from the space. So, I mean, the basic stories are, you look back at the days of, hey, let's just get a veteran. They're not going to actually, they'll own this amount of the company. I mean, I'm not going to say, but the famous case, of course, is, hey, they'll own this amount of company, and that I can at any time buy their shares back at $500, regardless of the value of the company, but they're going to be as the CEO, right? The reality is that prior to that, they were a janitor. This is an actual case. And the person went out and got all these veteran-owned set-aside contracts, service-disabled veteran-owned contracts, and they eventually got caught, right? Because what happened was, the guy's like, well, my company's worth $20 million now. And the veteran's like, well, I want my piece. He's like, no. Here's your $500, get out. And, what they, of course, they're going to do is they're going to go back and say, well, that's not, right. And that's what started the whole thing. But yeah, they have to understand that why it's important, and why it may seem like it's a pain right now. And it's going to be more, because, again, certification is very important. It protects all of us from people taking advantage of the situation. Now, the difference is the CVE, the Certifies for Veteran Enterprise, that's the VA's version of certification now. They are the only body that's doing it, right? But that's going to change, right? The SBA has been mandated to take over and do that entire process for all agencies. But let's just focus on the VA. So right now we have all other agencies but the VA doing self-certification. And then you have the VA doing certification, right? Meaning that certification is, they have to run you through a rigorous process to ensure that you are the majority owner of the company, you control the day-to-day operations, and that the company truly is yours, and that there's nothing in the operating agreement, there's nothing in any of the legal documentation or in general that shows that somebody else is behind you, basically running a puppet type, operation.
This is just so you can do business with the VA and get sale of everyone's small businesses contract set aside from the VA.
That's absolutely correct. That's just to be able to do that. What's going to change, though, is that will eventually move over to everybody, right? It's already been struck through regulation, it's been approved. Now the SBA, of course, has to run that time. And that's a lot, right? Because you have to then create an entire system. Even though the VA has it, it's a matter of integrating that with an enormous amount of businesses all of a sudden, and be able to say that, yes, they all meet the same requirements. Because the majority of people are not certified CVE companies, because they just self-certified and said, okay, because we're not going to do business with the VA, it doesn't matter to us. So when you have all the other agencies, so that, and they're like, I just care about this because my sweet spot's, let's say, HHS, or my sweet spot's this. What do I care about the VA? So that's going to be a lot of the challenges people have to face.
How many companies, veteran-owned businesses, disabled veteran-owned small businesses, are we talking about? Hundreds of thousands? Or?
Hundreds of thousands. No, it's not going to be a small amount of companies, because if you look at, I know if we look at, I could probably do it quickly, if you look at what's in just the Beltway alone, it's an incredible amount of businesses. It's hundreds of thousands.
What's if someone right now is thinking about certifying with the VA, give them a timeline of the process. Granted, we understand it's going to go to Small Business Administration, but right now, how long does it take, and what can they expect they would have to do? It's not easy.
So I would say it's gotten better. You're looking at 90 days probably for the process. I think that's a fair statement to make. I think the VA is working to get that to a manageable process. That will, move to the right a little bit depending on the requirements and how quickly you respond. But I'd say about 90 days. It's a significant amount of paper trail, but all those things should exist. And if they don't, here's what's one thing I will say about the VA process, and this is, I think, it's a positive thing. It teaches you about business in a sense that it teaches you you're going to learn more in that process about how the structure and operation and workings of a corporation are done. Even if you're a sole proprietor, right? It explains to you, because you have to then read, because the VA has a checklist. They're going to read through your documents, and you may have done it through LegalZoom or wherever it is. And that's fine. Wherever you paid someone to do it, an attorney or somebody like that. But it actually makes you go back and take a look at it, because they're looking for very specific things regarding ownership. They're looking for very specific things about shared space, how you set up your company, how you set up your resources, what you're doing each day. It kind of makes you stick to or actually have to create what is a real business plan and how you are operating your business. I like that aspect of it because of that exact reason. I think that's an important thing. I think that in itself should be something that everyone says, oh, it's a pain. It takes a lot of time. I hate the VA. It's so hard. Yeah, that's fine. You can get frustrated all you want. But the good out of that, the positive out of that, is that if you're not learning about how you structured your business, then you're not taking full advantage of the process.
My experience was, it was a lot of paperwork, but they were very responsive. They would say, hey, we need X, Y, and Z, tax returns from this year, meeting minutes from the annual meeting, whatever it was. You scan it in, send it to them, and they get right back to you. So I was actually pleasantly surprised at that.
Yeah, I think you got good and bad, right? I mean, it's just a matter of where you go and who you deal with. I've had good. I've had 90 days we're in. Yeah. I've had bad where it's, the black hole and we can't get out of it. And, we're doing everything we can to get out of it. But again, but that's like with anything else, right? You're going to find the good and the bad. But I do think it's very important to know that I do think certification by a governing body is necessary across all agencies. And it should be the SBA, of course, doing it because it makes the most sense, because they are the ultimate arbiter with regards to how, business size is determined. So I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, because right now, in all the other agencies where it's self-certifying, anyone could say they're a veteran-owned small business, right? And maybe they'll get caught randomly later, but there's no proof on the front end.
None whatsoever. I can go in right now. I could create a company and let's say, in a day, essentially get my tax identification number, all those different things, go and register my DUNS number, which will change, of course, to Ernst & Young's new system, which will be rolled out in the future. By the way, DUNS numbers will be gone. They won't be the system of choice. That'll be an interesting exercise, of course. But when that does happen, either way, I could do that in a couple of days and I could register a business and I can go on and register my record and say I'm a service saver. But all I have to do is check a block. There's no requirement of paperwork whatsoever.
So a few years ago, you were very involved in New York State, with helping pass a law there to support disabled veteran-owned small businesses registered in New York. Tell us about that. What's that program and what was your involvement?
I still think to this day, it's the best, one of the best pieces of legislation that was passed, right, with regards to service disabled veteran-owned small businesses. So they're the highest in the nation with regards to required set-asides. It's 6%, New York State. Of course,
their complete budget, right?
Yeah, whatever the annual budget is, 6% of that budget, and I think that's great because it kind of flows across the state, right? So it's not just when you think of that, you think of Albany and in the state of New York, but it's all the way down in New York City, right? So those funds are being spent everywhere. Involvement-wise, I just worked with so when Ken, so I always forget Ken's. Yeah, Ken, the hardest working man in show business up there, right? I think he's a Vietnam vet. Ken would run around and try to drum up as much support. And he was amazing, right? He still is. So Ken did everything in the world to get that office stood up, and we were pushing in businesses from everywhere we could to help out, and try to get more people encouraged to sign up, because it was such an important program. We didn't want to see the language whatsoever and people not take advantage of it. So I was more on the side of making sure I was on the information side of it, to make sure veteran businesses understood that, hey, you need to come in and work here. And the other thing is that this, which is important, is you can do as an external, or what they call foreign entities. Doesn't mean that you're overseas, but a foreign entity would be somebody who's not from the state, right? So state of Virginia, we're actually a certified service-able veteran small business in the state of New York, because we do business in New York all the time. Right. And we have we had a presence there too. So it's important to say that you may not be headquartered there, but do not take advantage of the fact that programs like that exists. And every state, different states have it. Texas has requirements. The state of Illinois has requirements. Ohio. You can look at all different ones across the United States, and other states have these programs out there to help you with government contracting at the city and state level for veterans.
Yeah, it's important to point out, we've mostly been talking about federal government, but, talk briefly about the opportunities you've seen at the city, state, and local. I mean, are those worth pursuing?
Absolutely. I just had this conversation the other day with someone talking about that state and local market, because I think it's grossly overlooked. So we think about dollar spend. Let's just look locally to me, where you used to also live. Let's look at Arlington County, right? Arlington County has a massive budget. In the billions, right? Same thing with Fairfax County, Virginia, right? Massive budget, and that's a county, right? That's not even, it's a city inside of a state, right? We're not even talking about what occurs in the state. State has also billions and billions of dollars you have to spend every year, and it's the same model. Now, listen, every state's different. The regulatory guidance and information is different at every state. So read the contracts and understand what you're getting into. Federal government is somewhat static, right? Because it's governing body, it covers everything. But the states absolutely are different, but in a good or bad way, right? You'll look at different payment terms, different requirements. Some mimic the federal government, but I'll tell you right now, not all do. So ensure you read what you have, but do not take advantage of the fact that those opportunities are sitting at the state and local level.
How can veterans and disabled veterans even know what's available in their area?
So the first thing I always tell people is to go up, get on Google, and go to this, look at the state. So for Virginia, you can just simply look at Virginia state procurement opportunities. I usually say use those words, and that should take you to the state site. And you could register first you'll have to register as a business, but you could register just to look at opportunities. And then they all now, I don't think why they wouldn't, will have search agents, they call them, and they'll send you these opportunities. You can set up your search agents every day, kind of like what they used to have for FedBizOps, but now for beta.sam.gov, where you'll get that morning dump of, okay, here you go, email, all the things that meet your keywords or the scope of services that you offer, and then you can take a look at that. But it's very overwhelming, so pick your states, right, and know where you want to go for. But you'll see all kinds of targets that come up every single day where you're like, wow, I didn't realize that much is going on in the state of Virginia, or that much is going on in the state of Maryland or the state of New York. I go through them as much as I can, but every day I see things that like pop up, and I'm like, wow. And I have so many different search agents that work, for our clients, that I'll see in the morning. It always starts like around 6 a.m. Like I'll just start watching them stack up inside my email queue, and then I'll see each state, and then, people are looking at them every day, but I kind of click on them and look at ones that I'm just want to see what's going on out there.
Yeah.
And there's 20, 30, sometimes new opportunities a day just in one single state or city.
What are those search agents? You check boxes or indicate what categories you're interested in, and they customize those for you?
That's right. So you check the block, you pick keywords that, let's say if you're an IT company, you're going to pick out very specific keywords or classes or sources of, services that you want to offer. And again, everything is different at the federal level. It's called NAICS code, North American Industrial Classification System, right? That's a numeric system that's used to carve out scopes of work. depending on what you are. But again, it falls back. I always call them scopes of work because it's easier to look at. But when you look at those scopes of work, it's going to be, software development, if it's going to be, or you're going to do, professional consulting services or admin services, human resources, things of that nature. You'll pick those. Those are super focused where you have to look at, and then you can add additional keywords to kind of narrow that field down.
Okay. You mentioned beta.sam.gov, is that right? So is that up and running? So Sam, if someone's coming online now who watches this is like, okay, I want to start a business, they go to the beta site or they go to Sam?
No, so it's now called sam.gov. No longer exists, right? It does, but it pushes you over, right? So all contracting opportunities, and this just happened 8 days ago. So on November 12th, FBO.gov, FedBiz Ops, but it was for all those years, I don't even know how many years, is gone. So now you have to go to beta.sam.gov, and that's where you will search for all your opportunities. It's actually, it's going to take a little bit of a learning curve for people if they're not used to it, but that's your SAM registration, right? So you look at that, you'll look at this federal assistance listings, your WDOL, which is your wage determination listings, all your contract opportunities. So what they did was they consolidated everything under one roof. So they took FBO, WDOL, CFDA, SAM, and they put it all underneath one single roof. And that's where, now this exists. So it's beta.sam.gov. And as of November 12th, there is no more FBO. This is the only source of record.
Okay, great. So that sounds like, at least in the federal system, that's a place that people should go to register, get set up, and then they should probably take some time to research what states and maybe local governments and register on those, because it's two very separate platforms, state and federal.
Absolutely. Yes, two separate platforms. And like I said, each state's going to have its own platform. So I would say, I always tell people when they're going to focus on stuff that you actually can service. So if you live in the state of Virginia, look at Virginia, and then look at Southern Maryland, and maybe look at the District of Columbia and see what's going on there, because those are all within your reach. I wouldn't say to start looking at California just because, you're not going to have the chance. So I'd say if you're going to, depending on where you are, just geo-target where you think you can actually have reach into it, and then look at those states for those opportunities.
And so when we talk about opportunities, there's, of course, opportunities as a prime contractor and then as a sub. And can you talk about the difference between the two and the pros and cons of both?
So I think that's one of the biggest things that people need to know, too. If you're getting into government contracting, I would say the normal way, if you're going to build yourself up and grow in that space, is when you first come in, it's just going to be all subcontracting, right? So what the difference is, so prime, it's all about privity of contract and how it's set up. So it's all basically from a legal standpoint, right? So
difference between the two.
Yeah. So prime contractor means you're, I guess the easiest way to always describe this is the prime contractor is you are the one who's doing direct business with the federal government agency, which means, and the best way to always determine this is that where does the invoice go? So if you send the invoice directly to, let's say, the Department of Defense, not somebody else, but that you're a prime contractor. That's probably the easiest way to put it out there. Now, if you're a subcontractor, that means you're working underneath somebody who is the prime contractor. You're going to send your invoice to them to get paid. So that means your contract is with, let's just Lockheed Martin. That's a good example, right? So your contract's with Lockheed Martin, right? Even though the end user is the Department of Homeland Security, that's not your customer, right? Your actual customer is Lockheed Martin because your contract between those two. So you need to understand the difference there. There's more opportunity as that subcontractor, obviously, when you get into the game, just because there are the subcontracting plan requirements, other things. But when you first start out, your focus should be getting those subcontract opportunities, right? It allows you to grow. It allows you to get experience. It allows you to learn your ways, the insides and outs of working with the government, but understand that those exist for a reason, right? You're not going to walk in, and maybe you are, right? You're one in a million, but my experience over the years has stated that you're not going to be the one who's going to get all those prime contracts right at the gate if you just open your doors. It's going to be those subcontract opportunities that are going to help you grow.
Well, for the prime, I mean, for any contract, one of the key factors is your prior past performance, right? And so if you don't have that, how are you going to really win a prime contract? Every contract has competition. So you're going to be going up against people who've been doing this maybe 1 year or maybe 20 years.
And that's exactly right. So people should understand that as well. People should recognize the fact that, yeah, you may have a great resume. Don't get me wrong. And I think that's great. It's not past performance, right? With regards to getting, you start a company, yes, you have that experience, but your company still needs the past performance. You need to be able to execute that. So when you sell yourself, especially in a subcontract position, that's what's going to help you. That resume will absolutely get you in the door to be able to start to work to get company past performance. But as a person, that's your past performance, right? Your resume, your past performance. But as a company, yes, you do need to get that past performance. Once you start to build your stable past performance up, then you can start looking at prime opportunities.
And as a subcontractor, you can develop good relationships with some of these bigger companies, right? And like in your example, it's Lockheed Martin. Say maybe Lockheed Martin had a contract to provide, I don't know, cybersecurity for a base, and I'm just a small company that focuses on, cybersecurity. You might subcontract it to me. We might work together for 5 or 10 years, where you keep feeding me opportunities, and that could make a big difference in my life.
And that's the biggest thing about networking, right? Because that's where those relationships are made. You don't ever sell it short. You go and knock on those doors. I know people that go walk the halls of every agency as a small business. That's important, but you got to also know that we're all playing in the same space, and that it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Everyone needs each other in order to grow, especially on a lot of these large contracts where there are those small business set aside requirements that are regulated and required by the federal government, and that those people need to meet that. You need to ensure that people remember you when they say, hey, you know who's a great person we can use on this as a sub? Let's use this person because they're outstanding. So keep that in mind, that those relationships will make a difference, and you absolutely will work with that, and you'll grow too, right? Because I've seen some of my clients, subcontractors, grow from very small roles on a contract, but they perform so well that they wind up having this massive economic boom inside their company, because they're like, these are the greatest people. Can you get more like them? Yes, I can. I'm going to do staff aug. We're going to do great. And they will grow that way. So those relationships will absolutely pay dividends in the end.
Do you think there are any companies out there that only do subcontracting?
I think there's a good amount of them. I think usually, I know companies that have never had aspirations. They get a little bit of some prime, like 80-20 rule, right? 80% sub, 20% prime. And they're happy in that role, and they don't want to do more than that. They don't have an issue with that. I think it's a preference on where you want to strategically go and grow. It's a little bit easier, right? I mean, if you want to avoid, not avoid, but there's less regulatory, compliance with regards to how the government reach back looks at when you're a sub to a prime. So I know companies that take that step a little bit and say, you know what, you let the prime handle it. We'll continue doing great things, and they're happy being that certain size, and they grow, right? I mean, there are companies that do a pretty good clip a year, being in that subcontract role. So, but some people want to be in the driver's seat. Some people just don't want to be in the driver's seat. It's personal preference, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned some accountability. So there are particular accounting rules that you have to follow as a prime contractor, right? That are different, and you have to be prepared for that.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. Like we say, I tell everybody, if you want to be a successful government contractor, you better learn compliance on every level, right? And understand what the regulation is. If you're never successful, don't worry, no one's ever going to look, right? But the minute you are successful, the federal government will absolutely come knock on that door one day and take a look, because if you take dollars from Uncle Sam, tax dollars from Uncle Sam, you have to understand there is a huge set of regulation, and it's complex, right? That's attached to it. And ignorance is not bliss, right? If there are things out there where the federal government has a lot of tools to use against you, if you just absolutely disregard regulation, because you can't claim ignorance, right? If you claim ignorance, it's called reckless disregard. So there's different things that you have to be very careful about with regard to setting yourself up for success. You have to read your contract. I tell that more than anybody else. Whatever's in the contract, like whatever you're going to sign, all those regulations are going to be in there. There's, yeah, Christian doctrine may apply, and there may be things that float out automatically that you don't see, but by far majority, most of the regulations, which is usually the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, those clauses will be in there that dictate what you need to require to adhere to it. But then there's going to be so many other things depending on the agency, but you got to look at that contract. And it's amazing. That's the one thing that drives me nuts, is that if we have an issue, and let's say we specialize in government compliance, but let's say the Office of the Inspector General is sitting there and they're already auditing them, and all I do is read the contract, and I automatically see, I've done this before too. I sitting at a table where I'm like, okay, we've done our cursory review. We already see where the issue is. I will sit at the table. I will turn over this piece of paper. I say, read this out loud. And when they read it out loud, I'm like, have you ever read that before? Yeah. And because it's so ridiculous the way it was written, and they did it. And that's why they're in that problem. So they're having that particular issue. So read your contracts, and it's going to save you. I know people are like, oh, it's easier said than done. No. Literally, read the contract and then set up your compliance program around it.
Well, as you wrap up, you're talking about your company now a little bit. You're at least alluding to it. What is it that GovConOps does, and tell us how you spend your time.
So, I mean, GCO, I'd say the majority of my time now is we're a government compliance firm, but we are business to business, right? We do interact with the federal government, but it's when usually either working to make a more robust compliance program for companies, or having to augment, legal counsel, if there's Office of Investigation audits or Department of Justice investigations, things of that nature. We are, I guess, data crunchers essentially from a contract compliance standpoint, right? We'll look at it from that contract management and compliance standpoint perspective and be able to mitigate risk within the company as best as we can by putting in processes and policies in order to do so. That's the before part. The after part, of course, is when there's an audit happening and we're sitting there and trying to, mitigate risk for the client by looking at all different types of practices and processes and looking at all the data that's inside that company in order to mitigate that risk for them. My day-to-day, if I'm not putting out fires because someone just got a letter of audit and I'm assigning people to do so, I actually still somewhat enjoy this part. I'm still working very specific cases with regards to that type of audit and developing strategic answers for legal counsel and reviewing documents and contracts. So in order to determine what is, what's a concession, what can we negotiate to, things of that nature, and then we'll provide those findings. Wow.
So you've changed your business over the years, and you obviously grown, but you really found a nice niche.
Yeah, it's interesting because what we do is we augment that. Listen, like I said, if everybody did everything right, it would be great. We wouldn't exist, and we wouldn't have all the attorneys like the one I'm speaking to right now, right? But no. So the reality is that people make mistakes, right? I'd rather catch you on the front end. I always say I'd rather, there's that great book, Left of Boom. Same thing we call left of sale. We'd rather get you in the front end of compliance because it's so much easier to deal with in setting up a good, solid, robust compliance program than it is after the bomb goes off, right? Because after the bomb goes off, it's a mess. And we're literally, with people asking us for data requests, the federal government for that matter, and they're knocking on the door and saying, where is this? Where is this? And we're on a timeline. It just becomes exponentially harder to deal with. And we have to throw so many resources at it because now we have to look at things in a vacuum and we also have to go against a timeline. So for us, like I say, I'd rather get you on the front end of compliance than when it's already too late and we're fixing the problem and getting audited at the same time. That's never a good day. And unfortunately it becomes expensive because, listen, the wheels of justice turn slow. We all know that. So if somebody's there, it's not like, oh, we're going to get them out in a week or two. It's going to take 6 to 9 months sometimes, and sometimes we're on cases that go 2-3 years, depending on the severity or the depth of where the Office of the Inspector General wants to go into. So you got to keep that in mind, and take that in mind that all of that could be avoided if you did compliance right the first up front. Yeah. So, and I will tell you, so it absolutely is a difference. I've had OIG audits go away in 60 days and be not that expensive to deal with because things were done correctly. We set them up, We had an answer for everything. They did the audit. We were done. And in that 60 days, the time was like maybe we spent 30 actually working the case. Everything else was small things compared to everything else. So you absolutely can measure the difference between having a great program and then, you know, waiting until the enemy's at the gate essentially, and then now we have to deal with this at a different level.
Well, how can you obviously very knowledgeable on this? How can people get in touch with you? What's your website if people watching this are interested?
Yeah, it's govconops.com, govconops.com. Take a look if there's any questions. We run, I mean, mostly again, it's the compliance side of the house. We can answer questions or point in the right direction from a lot of different good trusted resources on things that we don't do in the federal space. I get that a lot where people are asking questions about security clearances. They're asking about this. Those are some things we just don't do, but we work with all these different partners that do that, and we'd be happy to provide that information. So if you come over there and you have a question about, you know, government contracting, you know, submit anything underneath our info, you know, if you want to get contacted, and someone will reach out and be able to answer any question for you.
Okay, fantastic. Scott, you've been a treasure trove of knowledge, and I appreciate it. I know all the veterans who are watching it will also appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate, as always, the opportunity, Justin. And if you have a chance, Justin and us, we also do Burbiz. Make sure you guys come out. We do it across the country. And we're excited that we're. Say again?
What is Burbiz? Well,
Burbiz is a networking event it's a full resource networking, power networking event for veterans and military spouses. It's basically my elevator speech is it's having the ability to talk to some of the greatest resources out there, I would say, in a manner that you never were able to do before. Up front, right in front of each other. It's not through the web. It's not through social media. But you can have meaningful conversations and connections in an environment that's very fast-paced, right? But it's designed to be that way. And the good news is, and like I tell people, and you and I both have talked about that, that's where the whole idea came from was, you know, we didn't want veterans or military spouses to have to think like, oh, I got to start a business in order to go to this conference, or, oh, I got to find a job. It's really for everything, right? You just want, we say come for the networking, stay for the camaraderie, right? Because it's a matter of, you can get all that there. You could go find JobPath, right? Because talk to people about JobPath. They're there and talk about how great they are with military transition and getting that kind of help. But you can also walk 2 feet and you're going to learn about all these different nonprofits that'll help you with compensation and disability, you know, issues that you may or may not have. You're walking another 2 feet to Headstrong, and now you have, you know, potential mental health assistance. You're walking another 2 feet, and you're actually talking to somebody about fitness, right? And you're talking about just nutrition and things like that. So it's important to recognize that it's not a 3-day conference. We're never going to do that because we know people are busy. We never want that model. It's about setting it up for a certain. Yeah, it's a networking. It's a 4-hour happy hour essentially, where you can network with some great resources, and then we condense it so you could take that and then you run with those resources once it's done.
Yeah, great. So Burbiz, and how can people find out about Burbiz?
It's burbiz.com, BOURBIZ.com. Go ahead and go there. Event page. You can see when all the different events are going to be coming out. Justin and I post about it all the time, but that's, I would say, the best link to go head back to. And you'll be able to determine, you know, what's coming up. All our events are free to attend. Justin and I never wanted to ever have barrier for entry for people to come to. It's not really, I understand, you know, it was never in the spirit of why we started this. We wanted to make sure that everybody who comes, they don't pay everything, they pay anything to attend. So the only thing you have to do is time. Come out there and learn, and come meet like-minded people, and really learn, right? Because I mean, what we always hear from people is that they learn, they never realized that this person would be there. They connect with so many different people. And it's such a short period of time, but it's powerful, which is why I like it.
They often don't know the resources in their own backyard. And so that's what the whole thing is. Customized, it's local.
That's a great point too, right? Most people are shocked, like they didn't recognize it. This just happened too in San Antonio. Well, I was listening to, it was a soldier was actually telling me that they didn't realize that this was there. And it was the Texas Veterans Commission. And I would think, well, Texas, how do you not know that? But they were like, I didn't realize that they do all of this for me and they can help me out. So yeah, it's important to recognize that even though we have access to so much knowledge and data on our phone, it's a cluttered world. We know that, right? It's not organized very well. So that's the other part of, I guess, our focus of what we're looking at is we want to make sure that it's palatable and that you can walk every couple feet and get those resources from your backyard.
We have a big event coming up in January.
Oh yeah, Las Vegas made the most sense because what we looked at last year we did a real quick hit networking event there last year, and it was just so packed, and it was all veterans. So yeah, because SHOT Show, right? Because I mean, you look at the demographic, 60,000+ people show up for SHOT Show. Literally I thought it was in the high 80% are going to be veterans or military related that attend that show. That's our audience, right? So it would make sense to hold an event around the same time that the SHOT Show is happening. So we're going to do a power networking and resource event on January 21st, 6 to 10 p.m. at the House of Blues at Mandalay Bay. You can't ask for a better venue, of course. So after everybody spends a day on the floor, they can come meet with all these different resources, enjoy. It's a 4-hour open bar. But the best part is that there's going to be so many resources there because they're all there for SHOT Show anyway. Right. So that's what I'm excited about, is that we're going to have so much knowledge from so many smart people in the industry. And again, it just doesn't mean everyone's like, oh, SHOT Show, they think it's going to be government. That's fine. But everybody who attends that is from a certain walk of life of the military. And it's so great because that's what I noticed last year was like, oh, I recognize that person from the American Legion, or I recognize this person from, VFW, or I recognize this person from, not Team Rubicon, but like Team Red, White, and Blue. All those people will be there to do that. And that's why I'm excited about, because you have critical mass and everyone's already there. So we might as well just bring them together for a good 4-hour night. It's going to be a little bit of fun, of course, because it's Vegas. We're going to have a little bit of extra stuff there. We're going to do a $25,000 giveaway again for veteran businesses. There's going to be a lot going on. So we're looking forward to everybody. And yes, you can get to registration from burbiz.com. And it's free for anybody to attend. If you want a table, of course, that's a different, there's also going to be that site up as well.
Sure. Okay. Well, Scott, thank you very much. Hold on just a second, but I'm going to pause the recording, but thank you very much for your help today.
Okay.